8 years old girl vanished from a homeless shelter. The only man who knew anything was found dead. She missed school for over 3 weeks, and no one said a word. Not her teacher, not the shelter staff, not even her own mother. And by the time the city finally noticed she was gone, the only man who walked her out had already vanished. This is the haunting disappearance of Relisha Rudd. Welcome back to Minority Struggles. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time is right now. I appreciate you for being here and giving your heart to stories that matter. Today, we're going deep into a real-life mystery. One that starts in a city shelter, passes through silence, and ends with a question that still hasn't been answered. Let's begin. DC General wasn't what most people imagined when they thought of shelter. It was once a hospital, a structure designed to treat the sick, but by the time Relisha Rudd moved in with her family, the building had been stripped of any comfort. The walls peeled in long, curling sheets. Water dripped from vents no one could reach. The elevators stalled between floors. Families were packed in with blankets instead of bedding. Privacy replaced with thin curtains and heavier silences. People passed through this place like ghosts, each one trying to survive long enough to disappear into something better. Relisha was only 8. She had a bright, soft face and wide, uncertain eyes that often stayed locked on the floor. Her teachers described her as quiet, polite, always drawing. She liked yellow. She liked drawing flowers with long petals, hearts with too many lines, stick figures with curly hair. Sometimes, when the crayons were short and broken, she held them delicately like they were made of glass. At school, she was never the loudest, never the center of attention. But she always showed up, sometimes late, sometimes tired, but present. That alone set her apart from many of the other kids in the shelter, whose school records were often riddled with blank spaces. Then one day, she didn't come. The first day passed with no real alarm. It happened. Maybe she was sick. Maybe they moved. Families left DC General without warning all the time. But then came the second day, and the third. By the end of the week, her name had been marked absent every morning. Calls were made. No one picked up. Eventually, a note arrived at the school, delivered by her mother. It was handwritten in uneven, shaky letters. It said that Relisha was under the care of a doctor, that she was sick, recovering, that she'd be back soon. But there was something off about the note. The name at the bottom was unfamiliar. The signature didn't match any licensed physician. The staff checked their records. Nothing. The name on the note was Khalil Tatum. And Khalil Tatum was not a doctor. He was a janitor. He worked at the shelter. Not family. Not a guardian. Just someone who swept floors and hauled trash. But Relisha had mentioned him before. Told her teachers that he gave her snacks. Showed her videos on his tablet. Took her places. Said he liked to help. Her mother, Shamika, said he was kind. Said he bought Relisha clothes when she couldn't afford them. Said he brought food when things got tight. Said he even offered to let Relisha spend time outside the shelter with him, just for a while. For a break. So Shamika said yes. No paperwork was signed. No phone numbers were exchanged. No one checked the logs to see who entered or exited with a child. Relisha was walked out of that building like any other person with a badge. And no one stopped him. It was only when the school questioned the note that the full story began to unravel. When officials tried to contact Tatum, he was gone. When they returned to the motel listed in the shelter's visitor log, there was no one in the room. The front desk clerk remembered the man. Said he was polite. Paid in cash. Checked in under a different name. Yes, he had a little girl with him. No, she didn't look scared. Just quiet. Just tired. Like she'd been traveling too long. When investigators reviewed the security footage, it sent a cold ripple through everyone who watched. Relisha walked down a narrow motel hallway beside him. The camera caught her from above, her small figure, her thin shoulders, the bag in her hand. She looked up once, toward the door, and then they both stepped out of view. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. By the time the police searched the room, it had been cleaned, linens replaced, no personal items left behind. The staff hadn't noticed anything strange. No complaints, no noise, just a man and a little girl who checked in quietly and never checked out together. At the shelter, staff were questioned. Some had seen Tatum with Relisha before, said he seemed helpful, said he smiled a lot, that he brought her candy, little things from his store. Others admitted they hadn't paid attention. They were understaffed, overworked. People came and went. When police searched Tatum's locker, it was empty. Nothing personal. No sign of plans. His phone was off. His apartment was cleared out. The neighbors hadn't seen him in days. It was like he had vanished. And Relisha had vanished with him. Investigators went to Shamika again. Her story shifted. She wasn't sure when she last saw her daughter. She said Tatum was supposed to bring her back. She thought she was with his family. She couldn't remember if it had been a few days or longer. She was trying to cooperate, she said. She just wanted her daughter back. But the timeline was fractured. There were too many holes. No one could say exactly when Relisha had last been seen at the shelter. No one had kept track of her meals, her curfews, her comings and goings. Too many people had assumed someone else was watching, and now no one knew where she was. The first news story broke 2 days later. A small local headline. Missing girl. DC police searching for man seen with child. A grainy photo of Relisha's school picture. Her name spelled correctly. Her eyes looking out, frozen in time. It wouldn't stay small for long. Because what happened next would grip the entire city. Because the story wouldn't stop at a missing girl. And because the man who took her still hadn't been found. Khalil Tatum had never stood out until he disappeared. He wore a plain Navy uniform. Always had keys dangling from his belt loop. At DC General, he was just Mr. Tatum, the janitor who knew which vending machines $8 and which ones still worked. People said he was friendly, quiet, that he kept to himself, but helped when asked. But now, with Relisha gone, his name fell sharp. Police began retracing his steps. They went to the days in where the surveillance footage placed him. The girl beside him, small frame, braids tied back, had walked calmly down the corridor. No struggle, no hesitation. But to the detectives reviewing the footage, her silence spoke louder than anything else. She wasn't running, but she also wasn't home. Tatum had paid in cash. No ID, no credit card. He used a name no one could trace. The motel clerk couldn't remember much. Just that the man checked in during the late afternoon, stayed for several nights, and didn't make a fuss. He had been careful. Too careful. Back at the shelter, police questioned Shamika again. She sat stiffly in the folding chair. Her voice quivered between confidence and confusion. She said Tatum had promised to return Relisha. Said he was helping with her school. That she thought everything was okay. But when asked when she last saw her daughter face to face, she hesitated. I think it was the weekend before last, she said. The detectives exchanged glances. That was nearly 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks without seeing her daughter. Without reporting her missing. Without checking where she slept. Without asking to speak to her. Something didn't make sense. Tatum's home was empty. His mailbox full. Neighbors hadn't seen him. His phone went to voicemail. His last recorded call had been made 2 weeks earlier to an unlisted number. His locker at DC General was clean. Too clean. Not a paperclip or receipt left behind. It looked staged, like it had been wiped. Detectives searched his work schedule. His last shift had been logged 10 days ago. No formal resignation. No time off request. Just stopped showing up. That was the first sign that this was no misunderstanding. The second came a day later. A cashier at a hardware store on Rhode Island Avenue remembered Tatum. He had come in wearing the same uniform. Paid cash. Bought heavy-duty plastic sheeting, gloves, cleaning supplies. She said he looked calm. Focused. He didn't browse. Didn't make small talk. Just bought what he needed and left. The footage confirmed her story. He was in and out in under 6 minutes. And Relisha was nowhere in sight. It was a lead, but it also raised more questions. Why would a man, supposedly caring for a child, be preparing for what? To clean? To cover up something? Or to go somewhere he didn't plan on coming back from? Every possible answer was worse than the last. Tips started coming in. Someone said they saw Tatum near the metro station in Deanwood. Someone else said they spotted a man who looked like him getting gas off I-295. Each tip was logged. Followed. Nothing held. One by one, the possibilities dissolved. Then detectives got a match on a second hotel. Another check-in. Same routine. Cash payment. No ID. But this time, no sign of Relisha at all. Only Khalil Tatum. Alone. This was different. They searched the room. Found nothing that tied him to a crime. No clothes. No belongings. Just a hotel receipt and a guest log showing he had checked in for 3 nights, but only stayed for 1. It was as if he had booked the room to waste time or to mislead someone. And it was working. Every hour he stayed ahead made it harder to track him and harder to find Relisha. The school released a statement calling for the public's help. Her photo was on the evening news beside the words missing in bold red. But most of the public didn't know how long she'd been gone. Didn't know that the system hadn't noticed until someone double-checked a forged note. Didn't know that she had left the shelter under the arm of a man who didn't belong to her. Detectives didn't say much publicly. Not yet. But behind closed doors, urgency had turned into fear. Because the trail wasn't just cold. It was disappearing. Records were thin. Timelines didn't match. Shamika's statements changed again. She now said she wasn't sure exactly when Relisha left. Said she may have seen her in the hall the day after she went with Tatum, but couldn't swear to it. That moment, for investigators, was devastating, because it meant they didn't even have a confirmed last sighting, except for the video at the motel. That grainy clip of a girl walking beside a man in a long hallway was the last time they could place her anywhere. And that hallway didn't lead to a classroom, or a friend's house, or back to the shelter. It led to a closed door. A motel room no one had checked in time. A place that held its silence. Even as the city started to ask the question no one wanted to say out loud. What happened after that door closed? And where was she now? The manhunt was about to begin, and the city had no idea what was coming next. The 3rd week of March, the city finally woke up to her name. Relisha Rudd, 8 years old, missing. Her face, round cheeks, shy eyes, that hesitant smile was everywhere. On buses, on neighborhood poles, in corner stores, flashing between commercials on the local news. Her school photo, the one taken months earlier when she was still attending class, had become the image that defined a growing crisis. The police kicked into high gear. Every tip was logged. Every door was knocked on. Detectives fanned out across Washington, into Maryland, into Virginia. They searched shelters, empty buildings, alleys, and train stations. The flyers were printed in multiple languages: Spanish, Amharic, Korean. Every effort was made to reach as many eyes as possible. But time wasn't on their side, and neither was Tatum. Khalil Tatum's trail was erratic. He never stayed in one place. He used different names at motels, paid exclusively in cash, and kept moving at odd hours. It was like he had rehearsed how to disappear. But no matter how carefully he traveled, cameras still caught him. A grainy clip from a gas station at 2 a.m. showed him alone, hood pulled low, filling up a tank. Another from a late-night pharmacy caught him walking down an aisle with a duffel bag and heavy boots. Always alone. No one had seen Relisha, and yet he moved as if he wasn't running. As if he didn't need to. Investigators dug deeper. A hardware store security feed caught him buying bottled water, rope, gloves, cleaning wipes. On paper, nothing illegal. But in context, the purchases felt chilling. Everything pointed towards someone preparing for isolation, not caretaking. Then came a motel off Route 1. He had checked in again, same routine. Cash. No ID. Quiet. The clerk remembered him. Said he looked calm, like he had a plan. The room had already been cleaned when police got there. Nothing to find. No belongings. No fingerprints. No trace of a child. They canvassed nearby businesses. Pulled more surveillance footage. Still no sign of Relisha. But it was the next motel that changed everything. A maid went to clean room 214. The guest had checked out 2 days earlier. She knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open and stopped. Inside, on the edge of the bed, was a woman. Still, motionless. Police were called. The woman was identified as Andrea Tatum, Khalil's wife. The exact details of what happened in that room were never publicly released. But whatever police saw, whatever they confirmed behind closed doors, one thing became clear. The search for Relisha was no longer just about a missing child. The man they were chasing was no longer just a suspect. He was dangerous. The FBI officially joined the investigation. Officers followed, leads across state lines. Tips came in from Florida, Georgia, even Texas. One person claimed to have seen him on a bus headed south. Another said he'd walked into a restaurant in Baltimore and bought coffee like nothing was wrong. Each sighting triggered a rapid response. None of them panned out. A detective later told reporters, "We weren't chasing a man anymore. We were chasing shadows." What haunted investigators most was what wasn't happening. Not one sighting of Relisha, not even a hint. Tatum was appearing on cameras, in stores, around people. But the girl? She had vanished into silence. The fears settled in gradually, like fog that refuses to lift. What if she wasn't with him anymore? And if she wasn't, where had she gone? The news coverage intensified. Experts debated the timeline. Child welfare advocates demanded answers. Why hadn't an Amber Alert been issued the day she missed school? Why hadn't the shelter kept proper records? Why did a janitor have that much access? City officials stumbled through interviews. They said the criteria for an alert hadn't been met, that there was no confirmed abduction, no vehicle, no plate number. But the public didn't care about policy. They saw a little girl whose name had gone unspoken for nearly a month. The frustration turned to fury. At a church in Southeast D.C., parents gathered for a prayer vigil. They lit candles in plastic cups and held hands in silence. A young boy stood beside a poster of Relisha, holding a sign that read, "Bring her home." Meanwhile, detectives doubled back through every known movement. They returned to the motel hallway footage, slowing it down frame by frame. They studied the way Relisha walked beside Tatum. She didn't look hurt. She didn't resist. But something in her eyes unsettled them. It wasn't what the footage showed. It was what it didn't. What happened after that door closed? Where did she sleep that night? Did she cry? Or did she think she'd be going back to school soon? The detectives didn't have those answers. They only had gaps. Gaps in time. Gaps in surveillance. Gaps in paperwork. Relisha had been gone for so long before anyone even started asking. The community began searching on their own. Volunteers formed groups. Some walked through overgrown fields. Others handed out leaflets in shopping centers. Everyone hoped someone would see something. Anything. Then, almost quietly, a call came in. It wasn't from a motel. Not a store. It was from a city parks worker checking the perimeter of Kenilworth Park. He had noticed a small utility shed tucked into the woods. Its padlock was missing. The door hung slightly open. He didn't go inside. He just called it in. When officers arrived, they approached with caution. They called out. Got no response. One of them stepped forward, flashlight in hand. What they found inside wasn't Relisha, but it brought the search for Khalil Tatum to a sudden halt. The manhunt was over. But the mystery? That was only deepening. The call came just after sunrise. A parks worker named Ellis, who had been clearing debris along a marsh trail in Kenilworth Park, noticed something strange at the edge of the trees. One of the utility sheds, rarely touched except by maintenance staff, was standing open. The padlock had been snapped. The door hung lopsided, as if it had been kicked in or yanked with force. He didn't go inside. Something about it felt wrong. The silence, the damp air, the smell. He stepped back and called it in. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up the park trail, tires crackling over the gravel. The shed sat at the edge of a wooded patch, half hidden by tangled weeds and rusting fencing. The area wasn't a place where children played or joggers passed through. It was a forgotten pocket of the park, just out of sight but not far from where people live their everyday lives. Officers called out. No reply. One of them approached slowly, flashlight drawn. The door creaked open under the weight of a single nudge. The beam of light swept the corners. Then it stopped. Inside was a man. Still, unmoving. Khalil Tatum. The man whose name had been broadcast across news screens for weeks. The man who had walked out of a shelter with an 8-year-old girl and never brought her back. He was no longer alive. The officer radioed for backup. Within minutes, the scene was sealed. Yellow tape went up around the perimeter. Forensics arrived. The coroner. Evidence markers. Reporters circled from a distance. Lenses pointed like weapons. Inside the shed, the air was thick with dampness and dust. There were no personal belongings. No identification left behind. No map. No phone. No sign of a child. Just the unmistakable fact. The man they had chased across 3 states was gone. and he had taken the truth with him. Detectives swarmed the park. Dogs were deployed. Drones buzzed above the tree line. The nearby Anacostia River was searched by boat. Dive teams entered the muddy water. Volunteers were asked to stay back, but many came anyway, lining the outer fences with signs and prayers. Still nothing. No pink hoodie. No backpack. No shoes. No drawings. No one. The park became a grid. Cadets marked off zones with rope and flags. Shovels hit the ground in measured lines. Aerial scans were fed through software for thermal anomalies. Officers scanned trash bins, drainage ditches, hollow logs. But the woods gave up no answers. And the only man who could have explained what happened was now silent forever. For the detectives, the manhunt shifted instantly into reconstruction. They opened the timeline again, looking for the missing window, the crucial span of time between Tatum's last confirmed sighting and the moment the park's worker found the shed. It was less than 6 hours. 6 hours where something had happened. 6 hours they would never get back. They cross-checked everything. Fuel receipts, camera footage, toll records. They found a clip of Tatum at a gas station convenience store around midnight. He looked dazed, sweating. He bought 2 bottles of water and a bag of chips, sat down at a table near the window and stared out for nearly 20 minutes. Then he left. No one saw where he went next. The cashier said he didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, just left quietly. No mention of a child. No evidence she was with him. Some speculated that he had handed her off to someone else to hide her. Others whispered things they didn't want to say aloud. Investigators kept their theories private. The public only knew that the worst had not been ruled out. But without proof, there was no way to close the case. The shed was scoured for fingerprints, traces of DNA, footprints. Every inch was cataloged, but it yielded nothing that led to Relisha. 2 weeks later, the park search was scaled down. Officers still patrolled the perimeter, but the teams with dogs and scanners were reassigned. The reward fund grew. Tips slowed. The family held a press conference. Her grandmother stood at a podium, holding up a photo of Relisha, her voice cracking as she pleaded, "Please don't stop looking." One of Relisha's teachers stepped forward next. She held up a card Relisha had made in class, a lopsided construction paper frame with stick figures and glitter stars. "She gave this to me right before lunch," the teacher said, her eyes wet, before the glue even dried. The press room fell quiet. Shamika didn't appear. Her public statement came through a family advocate. She was not ready to speak. Meanwhile, DC officials began quietly reviewing the shelter. Inspectors found gaps in staffing logs. Visitor logs were missing. Some background checks had never been completed. The findings were summarized in a private report, but not released to the public. No one was fired. No one resigned. The shelter remained open, and Relisha's name began to fade from the news cycle. But not for everyone. One detective, known for never walking away from a cold case, kept working the timeline. He had a city map pinned to his wall. Red threads marked camera locations, store stops, hotel stays. A single note was taped above his desk. "There's still something we missed." He stared at that wall every morning because he didn't believe Relisha just vanished. He believed someone knew, and he wasn't ready, not now, not ever, to treat her name like a case file collecting dust. They called it the missing window, a stretch of barely 6 hours between the last known sighting of Khalil Tatum and the moment a city worker found that shed door hanging loose. In that narrow slice of time, something had happened, and no one had been there to witness it. Investigators traced every minute, every fuel stop, every step on camera. But when they laid the footage out across the timeline, it was like trying to complete a puzzle with missing edges. The night before he was found, Tatum appeared on a grocery store security feed. He bought a sandwich, an energy drink, and a plastic lighter. The cashier said he barely spoke, didn't make eye contact, just tapped his fingers on the counter as he waited for his change. That was around 11:18 p.m. By 6:12 a.m., a parts worker stumbled onto the open shed. Whatever had happened in between, however he got there, was now locked inside that gap. And the only thing they knew for certain was that Relisha hadn't been seen with him for days before that. Weeks, possibly. The last verified sighting remained that motel hallway video. the one where she walked beside him down a narrow corridor. Her small figure hunched under a too-big hoodie, her hand clutching a plastic grocery bag. The two of them in her room. Only he was seen again. That footage played on loop in the minds of the detectives, the teachers, the social workers, the volunteers who searched long after the news vans left. They replayed it not because it gave answers, but because it was the last proof she had existed in a world that still saw her. That image of her walking away from a camera and into silence haunted the city. The public's attention began to shift. New headlines took over the news cycle. But inside precinct walls, Relisha's photo stayed pinned above the whiteboard. The red marker beside it remained uncapped, still waiting for something new to write. The detective who refused to let go. His desk had turned into a war zone of post-it notes, timeline printouts, and grainy screenshots. He began re-interviewing anyone who had ever spoken to Tatum. Former co-workers, neighbors, maintenance staff at the shelter. Some said Tatum was quiet. Others said he was strange. One said she had once seen him in the break room, showing Relisha cartoons on his phone, laughing like they were family. That moment was never reported, because no one thought it was dangerous, because everyone believed someone else was keeping track. The shelter itself remained under quiet scrutiny. Journalists filed FOIA requests. Parents who still lived there began double-checking the rules for their own kids. A few left the facility altogether, fearing that history could repeat itself. Then came another dead end. One of the older maintenance logs showed Tatum had once worked a part-time city job near the Kenilworth sewers. That sparked a fresh search. Wastewater paths, tunnel grates, old access doors long since sealed off. Teams went underground. For days they searched in damp air under buzzing lights. They found nothing. No toy. No shoes. No notes. Not even a trace. It was like she had been swallowed by the space between timelines. Some started to believe she had been handed off to someone. A second party. Someone he trusted. Someone who could keep her hidden in exchange for silence. A few detectives clung to that possibility because the alternative was too heavy to speak out loud. But there was no evidence. Not one sighting. Not one phone call. Not one piece of clothing left behind in a lost and found bin or donation box. Relisha's name became more than a missing child alert. It became a symbol, a reflection of everything that failed her. A system that didn't notice she was gone for weeks. A mother who placed too much trust in the wrong man. A shelter that didn't track who left with who. A school that accepted a note signed by someone who wasn't even a doctor. No one person made her disappear. But no one person stopped it either. The city released a quiet report about internal policies. Promised new background checks. New shelter training. Stronger interagency alerts between schools and child services. But it came too late. And Relisha was still gone. At a town hall meeting, a woman stood up and asked the room, "Why does it always take a tragedy before they listen to our children's names?" The room went quiet. Because no one had a good answer. And because everyone already knew the truth. Relisha wasn't forgotten. She was ignored. The detective who had refused to walk away from the case left a note in her file that simply read, "No body. No proof. Not giving up." He kept calling numbers. Kept visiting the park. Kept looking at the map like it would change. And every year, on the anniversary of the last time Relisha was seen, he left a sunflower at the edge of the shed in Kenilworth Park. Not because he thought she would return there, but because he refused to be one more adult who let her vanish without a trace. The city had written her name in ink. He wanted to write it in stone. The mural stood just off a quiet street in southeast D.C., behind a small Baptist church that had hosted one of the earliest vigils. Painted in warm yellows and shades of lilac, it showed a little girl in a puffy jacket with her arms raised toward a painted sky. A simple smile on her face. Eyes lifted. Above her, a line in bold lettering read. She was here. People stopped there sometimes, especially in the spring. Some left flowers, real and fake. Some left stuffed animals. One woman came every Sunday and wiped down the brick with a wet cloth, never saying her name out loud, but always whispering something soft before she left. Relisha Rudd had not been found, but she had not been forgotten either. Nearly a decade had passed. Her classmates had grown up. Her old teacher had retired. The shelter where she once lived had been torn down and replaced by a fenced construction site, promising new, affordable housing. The corner where the bus stop used to be now held a sleek cafe with steel chairs and glass windows. But Relisha's name still carried weight. Every now and then a new tip would come in. A woman in Georgia claimed she'd seen someone who looked just like her at a dollar store. A truck driver in Tennessee swore a girl had once mouthed the word help through a window. A nurse in Delaware said a patient had mentioned a past too similar to ignore. Every tip was logged. None of them led anywhere. Detectives had long since rotated off the case. Except for one. The same one who still kept the timeline pinned above his desk. He'd never closed the file. Some years he received permission to re-interview old witnesses. Some years he didn't. But each March, without fail, he returned to Kenilworth Park and walked the perimeter with a flashlight, even if there was nothing new to find. Because he still believed something was missing. He believed silence didn't mean the end. It meant a page had been ripped out. At one point, a private group offered to fund a reward for information. The amount was large. The flyers were printed again, digitally aged photos of Relisha, now showing what she might look like at 16, 17, 18. The cheekbones a little sharper, the hair longer, the eyes the same. One of those flyers made it into a bus station in Chicago. Someone took a photo of it and posted it online with the caption, "Still looking for her." It went viral. Thousands of people shared it. But the silence stayed. A girl doesn't just disappear. Not without help. Not without failure. And not without people who look away at the exact wrong time. That truth settled over the city like a quiet shadow. The kind you don't notice until it passes over you, and everything goes cold. For Shamika, Relisha's mother, the silence became her boundary. She no longer gave interviews. No longer made public statements. Some said she moved to North Carolina. Others said she still lived nearby, but under a different name. No one could confirm either. But she didn't speak about it again. She didn't need to. The silence around her did it for her. The detective, now near retirement, said in one interview that he didn't need to know everything that happened. He just needed to know something. Something to close the space between the motel hallway and the missing window of time. Something to explain why no one, not a single person, saw her after that moment. He once said, "A name on a missing poster should never be the last thing the world remembers." And yet for many it was. Except here. Except in the park. Except on that mural wall, where each year on March 1st, people still gathered. Not in crowds. Not in protest. But in quiet. Children came with their parents. Candles were lit. One boy read aloud from a card he wrote in school. "I didn't know her, but I want her to come home." A woman who used to live at DC General stood off to the side. Her voice shook when she said, "She could have been any of ours. She was all of ours." No one replied, because there was nothing left to say. Only a quiet truth that everyone in that city knew in their bones. Relisha didn't disappear into darkness. She disappeared into people's blind spots. She disappeared because no one asked the hard questions soon enough. She disappeared because we all assumed someone else was watching. And by the time we looked, she was already gone.